I love this fucking band.
And if you are ready for some truly heavy atmosphere, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, that is Geoff, and we are talking about Gojira tonight.
Free your
I love Godzilla, man.
Yeah, Godzilla. Some good old kanji.
Kaiju.
Kaiju, I'm sorry.
I don't know what the fuck kanji is.
Ganja and kaiju mixed together?
Well, I mean, that's okay.
This has been Jeffrey's trip to China.
Actually, I think we're going to France, right? Is that?
Yes.
That's more accurate. We're going to France to talk about the seminal metal band Gojira tonight.
Yep, we're going to southeast France on the Mediterranean side.
Well, you know, when Gojira first started, they were called Godzilla.
Yes, they were.
Back in 1996.
And at some point, somebody figured out that name is copyrighted.
At some point, they got big enough to where somebody was like, hey, you might want to change that. So they're like, fuck it, we'll still call it Godzilla, but it's Gojira. Same fucking idea, same concept.
Going back to the original spelling.
Well, and you know what, though? I think that Godzilla or Gojira is a really good description of this band. A slower paced, plotting instrument of death.
I know when I started listening to it this week, I had heard it before, but as I started to get further and further into the albums, I said, this is some truly heavy atmosphere. Wow, Geoff is rubbing off.
Yay!
I just had to fight a joke there and just force it down as hard as I could. Anyway. Yeah, man, Gojira is no joke as far as being one of the best heavy bands out today.
Yep.
There's going to be a lot of worship on this. We've had a lot of negativity on this show lately, which is what happens whenever I'm like, we're going to talk about fucking new metal for a whole month. Well, it's June, so nope, we're done.
Thank God.
Well, before we start thanking God, I want to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, so if you have an Amazon Echo or Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
We love 5-star reviews here in Discography Discussion. And one of the things that we do when you leave us a 5-star review is we read that 5-star review. Do you guys want to hear our latest 5-star review?
Yes.
I think so.
Tell us, Uncle Dan.
We got one from Simon Leonard, or Leonard. I think it's Leonard. He says, best show ever. I'm a metal fan, and as a musician, I like to see points of views of others. Well, Simon, we have that in spades, man. So thank you so much for leaving us that review. Keep them coming, guys. We need how many more? 9 more before we do a Limp Bizkit cover of a cover.
As George Michael.
Yeah, you can do it as George Michael. You can do it as Fred Durst. But our unfortunate listeners are going to hear it.
Ooh, I'm sorry, guys. You sure you really want this?
Oh, they want this.
Speaking of things we want, we got a tweet from TJ Weber. Dear Discuss Metal, please do a Norma Jean episode. You can have me on as a guest, too. To which Dan said, Norma Jean is happening. But our good buddy Brandon Kellum has had dibs on that episode for over a year.
It's coming. It's coming. It is coming. That's all I got on that. We will do a Norma Jean episode.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
It is on the calendar, but we don't like to reveal that sort of thing right away, so.
We might drop hints here and there, but like keep you on your toes. We got a little bit of review from a listener on Podbean. Let's see, it's GT Pat 2, and it says, awesome interview. Primer is still on my playlist. I listen to it every day at work. I turned on a lot of Friends to Primer, didn't realize that half of the intro is on a drum machine. And about the 9/11, I was in a painting booth, listening to Primer 55 when the Twin Towers got hit. A lot of Camaro, Corvette, Trans Am, and Hummer body panels got their first coat of primer while listening to Primer 55.
Hell yeah.
It's in regards to episode 65. Thank you very much for listening. And keep those comments coming our way.
All right, so I'm going to take a couple of minutes here to talk to you guys about high brew coffee. And it's no secret that sometimes our podcasts go really late into the night, and we need something to keep us awake because with the amount of beer that I personally consume, I need something to kind of balance that out. So
Water?
We go no further than the fridge, which is usually stocked with high brew coffee. High brew coffee is a cold brew coffee, and they have all kinds of awesome flavors. They've got salty caramel. They've got plain black coffee, which is my favorite.
Double
Same
espresso.
here.
Double espresso.
Oh, the double espresso is really good too.
They've got caramel. No. It's cappuccino with protein, which I just had one of those, and I'm feeling a little bit more energetic. So definitely check them out, guys. Check out High Brew Coffee. Really huge supporter of the show, and we appreciate them very much. Are you pulling something up, Joe?
Breaking news, Discography Discussion Facebook. Take it away, Dan.
Okay, so as most of you have had no problem telling me over the past couple of days, or I guess it's just been the last 24 hours, yes, I know. As LA Dying has posted some teaser music thing on their Facebook or YouTube or whatever. It's in a video format. It's 43 seconds long of what appears to be new As I Lay Dying material. So let's talk about this.
Whoop-de-fucking-do. That's my thought on it. If they're, money hungry enough to let Tits Lambesis come back into the band and go do their shit.
Let him come back into the band. He is the band.
Yeah, I know, but they didn't have to. If we looked at the stills, it looks like some of the original members are with him.
Right.
And I'm not a fan of that, especially after all the shit that he's pulled and all the shit that they talked about him.
Well, we'll get into that. We didn't think it was right to have this conversation without John Beatty, so he is here with us tonight.
Hey, John.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's John Beatty.
Hey, I promise I'm not going to get disgustingly drunk this time.
He says.
Why not?
4 hours later.
That was like a AA meeting for me. Like intervention, like you just listen to yourself get progressively more drunk, and then you're like I texted Dan, and I was like, I think a podcast is great for a lot of people because honestly, I think it teaches you how to speak more and just bad habits you may have as far as social interactions with people. And I've definitely picked up on some of my own bad social cues, but what was crazy about that, and I felt bad that it took as long as it did, and I was shocked that you left in basically all but 30 minutes of it, I think. But outside of that, it was like, I would try to make a point, and I knew where I was going, but then I just completely avoid it, start name-dropping people that no one knows, really. And then I never got to the point, and I was like, oh, God, this is so bad. I guess it's very much like how Geoff is saying the new As Lay Dying record's going to be.
Ooh, man.
Shots fired.
That's rough.
Yeah, it's going to be a mess.
I want to start this off with okay.
Well, first, I think you should start off with the amendment you were going to make on the last episode. So we should start with there because that will piggyback into this episode, this little chat.
Okay, so in the original As I Lay Dying episode, I went on a 6.5 hour tirade about how Tim Lambesis was not truly repentant for his actions and had never offered up any type of initial apology, had no type of post apology for his actions, which made me, which heavily influenced my decision as to whether or not I'm willing to forgive Tim or whatever it is. Well, it does turn out that he did offer an apology back in December of 2017, and I'm going to read it as follows. Words cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am for the hurt that I have caused. There is no defense for what I did, and I look back on the person I became with as much disdain as many of you likely do, Geoff. First, I apologize to my former wife and remarkable children for all my appalling actions. There is not a single day that goes by that I don't wish that I could undo the damage I caused. And out of respect for their wishes, I will not discuss anything else about them, now or in the future. I also ask anyone reading this to promote healing for them by respecting their privacy and defending them from any negativity or anger which should be directed towards me. I was the sole offender and the only one to blame for everything that happened. To my family, I apologize for the trauma you faced and may still feel. This is an ongoing sentence that many of you serve because of me. I am so sorry to my friends who were betrayed by everything I hid from them and all the hardships I caused people who used to work with me. Bandmates, road crew, managers, attorneys, agents, label people, and more all had to suffer through many unexpected changes because of my actions. While they were dealing with the aftermath of my arrest, I responded toward many of them with bitterness that I should have directed towards myself. I know that I can't undo the animosity I brought their way, but I hope to mend what I can now as time goes by. To the people who looked up to me as an artist, I let you down in so many ways. I tried to show my best side to the public while feeding an ugly growing monster behind closed doors. I wrote lyrics about the person I wanted to be rather than the person that I was. I was living a life that lacked empathy and viewed everything through a self-motivated lens. I cannot say for certain what life looks like going forward, as so much is different now and I'm still learning. Music always has and always will be a part of me and has helped me get through the darkest parts of my journey. However, this apology is not a part of promoting anything. Rumors circulate, and that's something I've learned to accept. But this apology is just that, an apology to everyone around me. I've remained silent to the public since expressing remorse at my sentencing because time seemed like the best way to promote healing. Today marks the first opportunity to freely apologize without any motivation to gain favor from the courts, as I now completed the entirety of my legal sentence, including the completion of all parole and probation requirements. Let it be clear that no amount of time served can right my wrongs. I do not feel deserving of a second chance, and I'm not asking for anyone's trust. The way many people feel about me makes sense, and only time will tell if my future actions line up with my remorse, something I pray for every day. In the last 5 years, the ripple effect of all of my actions has extended further than a written statement can address. Thus, I will continue to apologize in both words and actions moving forward. Thank you for reading, Tim.
I don't give two fucks what that piece of shit says. That's my opinion on that.
Dad.
Because I've heard that, I've read that before when that came out in December, and it pissed me off then, and it pisses me off now. Well, I don't believe a fucking word that dude says. That's just me.
Fair enough. I'm a little bit more willing to be like, okay, well, we'll see how it goes. It doesn't mean I'm going to buy the albums on vinyl. It doesn't mean I'm going to buy CDs. I'm probably just going to stream it and give my opinion one way or the other.
I mean, I will do that part too. But he's just looking, the dude's looking for pity. He's looking to weasel his way back in. And the fact that
was back in December. I mean, it's been a pretty good chunk of time since then.
Well, and he's weaseled his way back in.
So how can you... I know this is semantics, but how can you weasel your way back into the thing that you started and that you own, if anything?
Well, no, I don't necessarily mean the band. I just mean
okay. in the public perception.
Yep, that's exactly what he's trying to weasel. That was it was a calculated maneuver. Went silent. Apparently got back with some of the guys from the band, and now, ta-da! Here we are. Everything's fixed, right? I wrote that apology back in December. Don't you guys accept me now?
Well, I think we don't know Tim personally, so we don't know what kind of interactions took place between him and his ex-band members. I don't know how many it took to get, certain people on board, yes or no. I don't know what the interaction was there, but I think it's just one of those things where I had given my views on the subject based on not reading that apology or not knowing that existed. And I would say that one thing that we didn't mention on the other episode was that the fan reception has been much more positive than I had anticipated that it would be. People are going apeshit over this clip that was uploaded, I mean, and you look at the comment section and there's a lot of guys like John that are like, well, let's just give it a chance, see what it sounds like. And then there's a lot of guys like Geoff that are like, fuck you, go kill yourself. And
I don't want him to go kill himself. No.
But it's one
Geoff
of those.
just doesn't want to buy the album.
Geoff just doesn't want to. He just doesn't want to.
I just want him to go gracefully into the sunset and leave us the fuck alone. That's what I want.
Which, I mean, I hate to say this because this is a 43-second clip with no vocals. Now, obviously, it is very much assumed that it will be Tim reprising his role as vocalist in the band. But we actually don't know that.
That'd be pretty messed up if it.
We don't
funny.
know. We don't know. How crazy would it be if they release a full video of that and it's some other guy singing?
Okay, so let's fall down the rabbit hole of that for just a second. So, as I had mentioned a couple of times before in the last episode, that Jordan and Tim are, like, from what I understand, the sole owners from a business perspective of As Lay Dying, the entity, the LLC, and so forth. Could we? I'd never really thought of I always figured, Tim would be the one that basically would strong arm it and continue on, because everyone else seemed to be like, fuck that, like, we're not going to do it. Because really, the time to have taken over the band and taken it away from Tim would have kind of been once he went to jail. And Jordan could have been like, well, I own half of it and you're in jail, so you'll still get the royalties when you get out and you're good. Now, thinking about it, though, for a hot second, as you were just saying that, is there a potential that, like, Jordan and all the guys got back together, they bought Tim out, and or did a thing where maybe from a business perspective, it's like, we're going to go on without you, but we're still going to pay you, royalties and maybe perpetuity for, back catalog and so forth. And Tim just sits around and gets to do like Austrian Death Machine and whatever.
It's entirely possible.
This could also be,
and we'll never know until it's actually released.
This video factor might be an experiment for them too, to see what the public perception is.
This does kind of smell a little bit like how Woven War did their thing before Tim just kind of shit all over it. It was like, yeah, all the guys are doing a new band. It's called Woven War. It's got so-and-so from this band singing instead of me. And it was just like,
right.
Okay.
Tell us how you really feel, man.
But I mean, it could be an experiment too, in the sense of like, we're going to put this up and we're going to see how the fans react to it with this. Because the assumption, is still like, it's probably true that it's Tim. Like, that's... Yeah. Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is probably the right one, And right. So, in this particular case, I mean, I'm just going to assume that it's going to be Tim. I'm going to assume that it was Tim that picked up the microphone in the video, all that. But the one thing that blows my mind the most is that, like, listeners of our show slowed down the videos to match up the tattoos of the individual band members to try to figure out who's who. So I think we've confirmed Nick Hippa
and Josh
Gilbert.
Speaking to Josh, though, the interesting thing, because as I always like to figure out, is how would they have been able to record in this day and age where, as we talked about with the Hopesfall when I had you on my show with Adam from Hopesfall, in this day and age where everything is known about everything, it's shocking that potentially there's a whole new As Lay Dying record that's been recorded that no one knows about. But the fact that Josh is a producer and can record stuff, that would make a lot more sense that he kind of did it in-house and just no one knows, because it was a secret project he was able to do on his own.
Right. So the conspiracy theory, there could be it could have all been done prior and we just don't know.
I say potentially. My theory is this, because, and I guess I just didn't articulate this, no surprise, very well in the last episode, but when all of you were kind of, or at least you, Dan, were saying, like, I need an apology before I'm willing to figure out where I stand on this thing. And with that being said, my thing was definitely that this thing already existed. This letter existed. I just don't think I conveyed the fact that there was the video or this letter at the time. So I think that was maybe the first step to put this whole thing in motion. Like, it's his public repentance. We'll kind of see how everything goes. For the most part, just like anything with As Lay Dying, everyone fan-wise seemed to either be, you did your time, so on and so forth, or fuck you. And some people who were just kind of like, well, I don't know, we'll see how this pans out. But I think that was the beginning of the groundwork, and I think much more of that maybe has gone on to, like, maybe Tim's reached out to everybody and been like, hey man, like, I was a fucking dick and I ruined your lives. Like, I took earning potential away from all of you. Like, I did terrible things to a lot of people, like he said in the apology. And to me, when I read that initially, like, I was like, I think this is the groundwork, honestly, for him to try to make amends to the entity at the time that was As Lay Dying.
Or like Geoff said, tried to weasel his way back into their good graces. And who knows, this could all be money, man. This could just be like, fuck it, I don't like you, Tim, but I like to make money, and this is a job. People don't always like their coworkers.
Wasn't that the release between Wes Borland and Fred Durst It's like, we hate each other, but we make magic, so we're going to be in a band together and not like each other.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And they didn't make any bones about it. They pretty much told everybody, and that's just how it is, and sometimes that strife, does make magic whenever you have those opposing forces. But for me, like I said in the last episode, and it's still my perspective on it, it's not my job to forgive Tim, and I don't have to, and I don't plan on it. And if he becomes the most successful metal musician in the history of music, I'll be bitter and pissy about it. But that's just my perspective. I'm just one person.
Geoff will never forget.
It's what us podcasters are here for.
Yeah, just like I don't have to really say anything because Toomey already said it about Vinnie Vincent. I mean,
fuck that guy.
Oh man, he went in. I sent him a text. And I go, man, it's too early for this kind of hot take.
Holy shit!
Oh no, it was spot on, man. I
agree.
We don't have to say anything because Toomey said it for everybody.
Yeah, I don't think the three of us gave two shits in a bucket whether or not Vinnie Vincent was going to be there.
I was like, yeah, because we were even talking about. I'm like, do we even want to have him on? And like, I guess since he's like one of the big headliners, we maybe should try him. We're like, nah,
dude. If he'd have showed up and even been cool and wanted to do an interview or something with us, I'd have been like, you guys can interview him. I'm gonna go take a huge shit. Like I just could not have cared any less about that.
Yeah, there's so many other cool people there that I was more interested in talking to.
You were so sweet in Lost Boys. Wait, you weren't in that movie?
Oh fuck! You thought you got? Oh, never mind.
you look like a vampire.
Never mind. I gotta go. Yeah, fuck. But yeah. I mean that's pretty much where we're at on this whole Tim Lambesis thing. I mean, I'm more in the camp of we'll just see what the fuck happens, I guess. And Geoff is.
I don't give a fuck what
very
happens.
clear that he doesn't care at all. But we haven't heard anything from Joe.
I stand by what I said on the episode. I am not interested in supporting your professional endeavors because of what you've done. And I'll be very curious to find out if the band changed their minds on the subject.
So I'll be doing the Patreon episode on this
all by yourself.
Episode all by myself.
No, John's going to be on it with
on
you.
there.
I'll do it. Yeah. I've said all along I will still follow it.
Welcome to Dan's Untitled podcast.
Quick shout out, John, where you can find John's Untitled podcast.
Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube on John's Untitled Podcast. Tweet at me at John's Untitled Pod and email at johnsUntitledPod@gmail.com.
He just did an interview with Adam Morgan from Hope's Fall. He had a co-host on there that was pretty damn sexy. So
I was on there? I didn't even realize that. Huh.
I guess you guys will have to just go listen to it to find out.
Surprisingly, interestingly enough to me, that episode that I had Dan on with me to do has done just as good without any publicity as the episode that I had with Brandon from Bleeding Through that made headlines did. So I think that speaks to the legacy of Hope's Fall.
Absolutely.
I was on board as soon as I heard the line from Adam. I can hear Dan really good.
Yeah, I think Joe creamed his pants right there. Badass microphones. Drummer, lots of worship there.
So, Dan, tell me about Gojira.
Gojira is a French metal band that started in 1996 under the name Godzilla, as we had spoken of before. Around 2001, they changed the name of the band to Gojira because why not? I think the name Gojira sounds better anyway because the band does lean more on the more artful side of things. And so an interpretation of Godzilla as Gojira, it just sounds a little bit more refined, and I'm into that. I don't know about you guys. This is one of the most technical bands I've heard while still being extremely atmospheric. It's almost like if Meshuggah had a more sensitive little brother. That's kind of the ballpark we're in when we're talking about Gojira.
And we wonder why Gojira is one of my favorite bands.
I could definitely say after listening to it this week, I found it interesting that as soon as I thought I found a pattern in the music, I'd look at my phone and I would not be on track 7, and I would have sworn to you that I was at least on track 4. None of the songs on the early records are extremely long. They're standard metal fare, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, a couple 2 minutes here and there. Every time I expected them to do something to kind of form an idea or something in the realm of a chorus. They just didn't.
They have a couple of choruses, but it definitely doesn't come until later in their career.
It's not a defining characteristic of the band, at least not in the early going.
Yeah, Terra Incognita is all over the fucking map, and I think they're just kind of cutting their teeth.
Well, this was the first Gojira album that I had not heard.
Oh, okay.
Going into this, because I got into the band on From Mars to Sirius, so I didn't know about the Link. I didn't know about.
The Link is the shit, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd heard it. I had the Link alive or the Link live, which was them playing that album just live. So I had heard it, but I hadn't heard the original studio production. And Gojira is such a fucking tight band. There's almost no real difference between the two at all. So, no complaints there. But, man, this first record was just goofy because it doesn't really sound like the Gojira that we would more recognize today.
Yeah, I think it's the most brutal thing that they've done as a collective, album.
It's more death metal for sure.
Yeah, it's just insane. I mean, that's the best way to put it. It's pure chaos. Because it's like Joe said, as soon as you think you're going one way, all of a sudden, whoop, they take a left turn and you're like, what the fuck just happened?
But it's not obnoxious like Meshuggah is sometimes.
It's a little obnoxious.
I love Meshuggah, but how many different ways can you count to 17?
Well, Terra Incognita is pretty in the vein of Meshuggah. I mean, they tone it down as time goes on, but Terra Incognita it's fucking all over the place.
If you're an old school death metal fan and you only could listen to one Gojira album, this is your jam. This is brutal. Now, it still has a lot of that Gojira time changes and weird shit and patterns that you're kind of having trouble following. And as soon as you get locked down on one pattern, they've moved on 3 times. You're just behind at that point. And so this first record was crazy. I mean, it's really, really long. I think that was the only real issue I had with it, is that
it's like an hour and 17 minutes.
Yeah, it definitely dragged. And granted, this record came out in 2001.
Yeah.
So they'd spent some time building up these ideas.
They'd been a band since 96. So we're looking at, 7 years, almost 7 years of material.
Right. And then once you figure that you have brothers that are in the band together, the Plantier brothers, you realize, that's even more time to, build up material and have just a smorgasbord of shit to choose from.
Well, what I didn't like is that the lead vocal on this record was so significantly changed. Not changed, I mean, this was the original, but it was different than what I was used to with the band, and the guttural vocals didn't do it for me so much on this record. I think they took something that they were trying to make sound unique, but I think the vocals actually kind of dragged it down, because that was the least unique aspect of this record, was the vocal delivery. It kind of was a little more monotonous.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that.
I mean, a few clean vocals thrown in, but not much.
As time went on, Joe definitely he went to finishing school. I've said that before, but I think it's very apparent in their music that as time went on, he learned to do what he was doing better. And like you said, it's just like it was almost like it was really forward. Yeah, so you didn't have quite that punch. I don't know, that more guttural just fullness to his vocals, and it's just not quite there yet. But it does get there eventually. But if you want to just be blitzed out of your mind and then put on an album and wonder what the fuck's going on, this would be a really good choice for that.
Yeah, I mean, I had to listen to it 5 or 6 times. I spent the majority of my listening time focused on this record because I was trying to get it, and then I kind of realized after I got through the 5th playthrough that I wasn't going to get it if there was something to get.
No, there's nothing to get other than the fact that it's totally spastic.
The atmosphere isn't here on this record like it is on the later releases, and that is noticeably missing because this sounds more cold and more calculated, like more like Meshuggah. Really, right. is the biggest complaint with this album is it sounds like a very Meshuggah derivative product.
This is the album they've been writing for the past 8 years of their life. It's just the heavy shit that they came up with, and they structured it into a single thing. thing.
Right, this is Godzilla. This isn't Gojira.
I like it, but I like it for I don't know what to put on in this group of 20 people that just showed up at my house. I guess I'll put on Terra Incognita. It's not
you
bad.
put on Terrorizer by Pig Destroyer.
But it's good. I'm ready to talk about the link. How about you guys?
Yeah. The link is really when the show gets started.
Yeah, the link is one of my favorites. It might be because it's one of the first.
Geoff, do I hear your Sepultura sense going off again?
Possibly. And as we go further and further into this, there's a reason.
There's a link.
Yeah, there
to
literally
Sepultura.
is a link. And that is because Joe played bass in the Cavalier Conspiracy.
He did some stuff with Lamb of God, too, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so. I'll have to double check that. But I do know that there was a... He had initially... Max wanted the bassist from Gojira to be in Cavalier Conspiracy, and he said, no, why don't... I got something else going on, but Joe will do it. And that's pretty fucking cool to me.
He's just a fucking singer. We'll just throw him out there. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when you realize that, no, this entire band is full of just incredibly gifted musicians. But the link is when it is the link. They start putting it together. This is a really, really, really good album for a sophomore effort. And his vocals have really improved on this album as compared to Terra Incognita, in my opinion. He's still not quite there yet, but it's much better.
Yeah, it's not the Meshuggah wannabe vocals on this record, and I really like the atmosphere on this. I like how it started off more tribal. This sounds more organic than Terra Incognita did, which sounded more, like I said, like more machine, cold, calculated. And it's not that there's not calculation going into this. They actually are really much more melodic on this record.
Yes, they are.
To a point where that I don't think that they ever really returned to this until they got to their latest album, Magma. I mean...
I disagree. I think Le Font Sauvage is got some of that on... Actually, quite a bit of it on it.
Yeah. All right. But this record was definitely more a different side of the band. And like I said, they did re-release this record... They did a live version of it.
That's not a re-release. That's a live recording.
It sounds just as good as the studio, and I think that's just a testament to how tight this band actually is.
I think the first listen, it sounded like the previous record taken to another level, but at the same time, it felt slowed down, but slowed down on purpose. Like somebody looked at what they had and said, all right, now let's write a story instead of just writing words on a page. And I tried to rationalize this particular record as if Max Cavalera was hanging out with Opeth, what would it sound like? And I think The Link by Gojira is what I came up with. Because it's very slow, drawn out, calculated, heavy, atmospheric. It just all kind of goes together. And I don't know a lot of bands that create this type of heavy.
I agree with the Opeth part. I don't agree so much with the Max Cavalera, as I think his delivery would have been much more frantic than this. But I think that Gojira is in a very special category of band. I hold them in the same light as a band like Opeth or a band like Meshuggah, in the sense that they create original sound that isn't just blast from beginning to end. I mean, Meshuggah comes close to that, but what they're doing is still a little different. What Gojira did here is they took what they had established on Terra Incognita, slowed it down, added spades, more atmosphere, much more of an organic sound, and this sounds like real people playing instruments.
They made it very deliberate.
However, they're still playing instruments better than you or I could play just coming up with it. I mean, for as slow and organic as this sounds, this isn't sloppy at all. I mean, their intentional riff choices, their intentional patterns are, bar none, the most enjoyable part of this record and this band.
Yeah, this is the start of my Gojira. I guess that's probably the best way
Hashtag my Gojira.
Yeah. Seriously. But I like that, like you said, how tight they are. I think that's really what starts to become really clear on this. It's not 4 people in a band. I mean, it's just a wall of music and sound, and that's kind of what I actually, in regular rotations of albums, especially not just songs but albums that make it in my rotation, that's kind of what I'm looking for, is just that cohesiveness from beginning to end. And The Link is the first album of theirs that I think accomplishes or gets close enough to accomplishing it to make it into the regular rotation. Terra Incognita is just more of a, let's just, throw a monkey wrench in it, and holy shit, this is pretty fucking crazy.
It's unusual when we really don't care much for the first record from a band.
Yeah, and we like the second.
Yeah, normally the first record is what you compare everything to, but I guess for me, what I compared everything to more was From Mars to Sirius, which was the first Gojira album that I had bought.
You ready for this?
Yeah, and I remember when I got it, I got it because of how unique the cover artwork was, which has whales floating in space.
Oh, no.
And there's planets.
No, it's Star Trek 4 again.
And no, it's not that bad.
No, it's the Sea Shepherd bad.
It's but because I was in this metal shop that's no longer around. It's more of a I think it's like a shitty like teen resale trendy shop now, but
oh boy,
it used to be a metal shop. Like if you wanted to finish off your creator collection, you could go into this metal store. And I remember I was in the death metal section, and I'm not sure why this was in the death metal section, but I guess I just didn't know where to put it. Seriously, try figuring out what genre section to put Gojira in. Groove metal, maybe.
That'd probably be the closest thing.
But then they'd be next to Pantera.
Oh.
You can't have that. So, but I picked this up because of how different it was, how different the lyrics were. Because, I mean, I'm surrounded by, like, these Cannibal Corpse records, these Gore Guts records, just all this mutilation and death everywhere. And I just was feeling a lot more positive that day. And so I was like, I'll get this fucking record with the floating whales on it. And it was definitely a lot heavier than I thought it was going to be, just based on the cover. And one of the interesting things is me and my wife listened to this for about 2 weeks after I got it. She didn't have a choice. I mean, she'd need to go to the mall for something, and I'd be like, that's fine.
It's not just your wife, man. Nobody has a choice when you have control of the CD player.
We're going to listen to this Gojira band. And one of the things she pointed out that she liked was that how the band makes whale sounds with their guitars, which is really strange in the first song, because like to fit with the whole whale theme. And at one point he even says, the song, he's like, whales in the sky, like just to drive that point home that everything that Gojira does is intentional. It's all tied to a central theme, with this record being predominantly about preservation of the environment, which is a big thing for them.
Yeah, it's a very big thing, and it's not a mistake that there's a whale on the front, because they contribute on it, and at least they used to be a big, I haven't checked lately, but they used to be a big part of the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. And a lot of people know what the Sea Shepherd is because they had a show on Discovery Channel as they were focusing on interrupting whaling boats from Japan. So they're very environmentally conscious. I know that at least Joe is a vegan, and it's been a very prominent thing for him. So I mean, I think it's kind of cool that you have this metal band, instead of saying, I'm going to rip your fucking guts out, and fuck the whole, they got, more substantial things to say. I think that's part of the reason why I like them so much too. Even if I don't agree with everything they have to say, it's one of the few times that I start paying attention to your lyrics, is because I think that there's a purpose behind a lot of the things that they have to say. And I think that's pretty fucking cool, that whenever you can make your music enjoyable, but you're not overly preachy, I think you're doing a really good job, because that's a really fine, difficult line to walk. And I think they do a really good job of that.
You mentioned purpose. One of the first things I noticed on this record was, even with the very first song, there were musical themes that made their way onto this record from the previous. And usually when that happens, a good example in my head at least is with Between the Buried and Me with Chevenel Part 2. It's very purposeful. There's an additional piece of message about something that they wrote before that they want you to either grasp onto and remember, or they just didn't have any new ideas and they just went with something that they did previously. For me, I felt like it was purposeful, and this record also is a very good use of not very much vocals. They allow the music to set the tone and actually build the idea. The vocals almost feel, in addition to the music, kind of like the French horn player in an orchestra. He's not always doing something, but when he is doing something, it's very purposeful as to what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, this record doesn't have a lot of vocals, and that's good. Not because the vocals are bad by any means, but, I mean, just letting the fucking pick scrapes do the talking, you know? And this record is actually, I think, a little heavier than the Link was, in the sense that it blasts a little bit more. It's got a little bit of that Terra Incognita in it, but it's more controlled this time. It's not just some out of control monster like Godzilla would be, but you know, it definitely it's got that slow plod, that build up. It's got all the atmosphere from the Link and then some.
Yeah, this is when you start to realize how good of a drummer Mario is. I mean,
yeah,
dude,
This band is tight.
it's so fucking tight. It's disgusting. It's so good.
But yeah, I mean, Mars the Sirius was definitely a big record for me. There's a song on here called World to Come, which is predominantly clean vocals, which is a little different. And it talks about, like, you know, the results of pollution and, you know, like what the world would turn into and all that stuff. And I really dig that track, just the way it builds. It's kind of a slow burn, but really enjoyable and kind of different than anything we'd gotten from them up to this point.
Yeah.
And that song really catches me. It even has a little bit of a southern twang at the beginning of it, and that's different, you know. You're like, what the fuck French metal band is playing a southern twang on a song, but
The French metal band that has a song on their record called Flying Whales.
right. So yeah, I love this song. I love the way it builds and just the way the clean vocals sound. This is better clean vocals than they had ever up to this point.
Oh, definitely. And I think it's the best song with clean vocals until you get to Magma. Because there's not number one, there's not much clean vocals between now and Magma. But it's good enough to tide you over. It's a really good song.
Yeah, that's definitely my standout track. I like that one. I like the song Flying Whales. Because how could you not? There's actually whale songs on this CD, like whale like recordings of whales, whale cries and things like that. And it's all very metaphysical and very hippie.
Yeah.
And for some reason I love it because, like, there's this ball busting metal band behind it, and
Truly heavy atmosphere.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this would be, if the band had stopped here, this would have been my end all be all record by the band. But luckily for us, they did not stop here.
Yeah, I have to say real quick, my standout tracks were Ocean Planet and Unicorn.
Ocean Planet, fucking great song.
Yeah, it is. So now we're on to The Way of All Flesh from 2008.
Probably my favorite album title of all time.
This was their Hey Guys, We're Still Heavy album.
Yes, and the first song is my favorite on the album. Ouroboros is just unbelievable. Listen to this all the time.
Yeah, this song's great. It's a great album opener. It's very much establishes Gojira, and their sound that they had established on the previous two albums is here.
Yeah, the only bummer for me is the fact that the rest of the album doesn't live up to it, but...
Oh, I don't know. I think it does. I mean, I think Toxic Garbage Island is fucking great coming in after that. There's a little bit of reverb, a little bit of, I don't want to say vocoder, but it sounds a little bit vocoder-ish on Toxic Garbage especially.
That is called layering.
Yeah, it just sounds really good, though. It sounds a little electronic, which is kind of weird because I think the sound of the band is still very organic, tying in with the Way of All Flesh theme. In that, you know, it is 10 times more technical than for Mars is Serious was this is one of the first examples of can't drop a pin between the riffs that Gojira has given us, except for what they gave us on Terra Incognita. Didn't think I'd be referencing that album as much as I am.
Yeah, I know it is kind of crazy.
I'm starting to see it as we have this discussion that there is more to it than I had previously thought.
Yeah, this is when you realize, the previous album was how good we saw Mario. Now it's Christian, the lead guitarist, is just... The Duplantier brothers get all the fanfare, but my God, Christian is a fantastic lead guitarist. So...
Yeah, and they're not a noodle band.
No.
And
it's with the purpose.
That's one of the things I like about them is they're not necessarily masturbatory in their delivery. It's just that it's like they sit down and focus on like, okay, we're going to write a 6-minute song, and we're going to do everything we can to keep it interesting for that 6 minutes, which is really hard to do with this kind of like down-tuned genty sound that they have. This is before that was a trope, but they did it really well. They definitely still wear the Meshuggah influence on their sleeve, but it's an influence. It's not a lift. And
it's not a defining characteristic.
Absolutely not. And like this record, vocally, lyrically, just is the entire package. It was, to me, the perfect follow-up to From Mars to Sirius. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Adoration for None, featuring Randy Blythe from Lamb of God, which is by far one of the heaviest Gojira songs I've ever heard.
It's kind of hard not to be with Randy on.
This is like some glass casket shit going on right here.
Crazy. But I mean, it goes to show you that, like we're using the word intentional. That's the word of the episode. And this song almost serves just the purpose of saying, look, whenever we play slowly, we play atmospherically, it's because we want to, not because we can't fucking pull off a badass metal song, when we want to. And this song is a perfect example of that, of just saying, like, dude, this is how extreme Gojira actually is, but we're just being very intentional with our song choices with what we do end up playing. And so this song really turned the record around for me, and I was in love. I mean, I would play this song on repeat, just, all day, driving around.
This felt kind of like an intermission for me. Like, this was the space between track 6 and track 8. But it was purposeful in its placement. It's an overwhelming amount of heavy directly in the middle of the record.
I think on a vinyl record, this is a great opener to side B, And it is. I mean, this is just a fantastic record through and through.
Do you have this one on vinyl?
I don't yet.
Okay.
Key word there is
yet.
Eventually, I'll get it. See, everybody reissues. Eventually, they're going to reissue, so I just have to wait my turn.
Yeah, and then you'll get it on Heavygram whenever they do.
Yeah, I know, probably. Which apparently doesn't make shit for difference, but we can have that argument on a different podcast. But
yes, we can.
But no, this record was just absolutely killer, and it is probably my favorite Gojira record out of their whole catalog.
Really?
Just yeah, man. It came out at a time when I appreciated the previous record from Mars to Sirius because of how melodic and different it was. Whereas this record was a little bit more up my alley as far as brutality goes and as far as just technicality. And I think this is one of their more technical records. And, that just can't be denied. I love this record so much.
Cool.
So we ready for the next one?
I think we are. Enfant Sauvage.
Enfant Sauvage.
Very good pronunciation, sir.
And
2012.
This, not only is this my favorite Gojira album, this is my favorite album of the last decade. It's not even close. The second favorite we've talked about, and that is Language by a Contortionist. But Enfant Sauvage is the wild child, and it's Victor of shit, I can't remember, but it's about a real kid that was in France in the 1700s growing up as a feral child. And this album is just pure metal perfection for me. I can't I can't put it any other way. It's brutal when it needs to be. It's beautiful when it needs to be. They're so tight. It might be a little overly commercially polished for some people.
No.
But I think this is absolutely perfect. When I try to explain to somebody what is the perfect metal album, this is what I want to put on for them.
Dude, the tonality on this record, just some of the
it's sick.
Some of the sounds that they make, I don't even know what you're talking about it being more commercially polished, because I think commercially Mars the Sirius or Way of All Flesh is going to be much more commercially listenable than this. This is a totally different beast as far as what they had done before, because it's blasting, but it's not blasting like Terra Incognito was. It is blast like the guitar tones that they achieve on this record are just mind-blowing, and I'm not the kind of guy that listens for that shit, but it's so front and center.
Yeah, this is as sick as it gets for me. I'm glad that you don't think it's commercially polished, because sometimes I get accused of liking stuff that's a little too pretty.
Well, we'll talk about that on the Demon Hunter episode later.
Oh, yes, we will.
There's a huge difference between commercially polished and studio polished. Commercially polished, to me, is insert name of bullshit rock band.
Okay.
That they listen to on 105.7
Cold.
The Point.
Okay.
See, even Cold would be not that well polished, because I've listened to Cold. We'll get into that on another episode.
Well, I think you're explaining what I'm trying to explain better, Joe, and that is the fact that the production quality is just outstanding. I mean, it's sonically it's a masterpiece, in my opinion. I mean, whenever I go home and I crank this up, it's pure bliss for me. I can't give this album enough credit. I listen to every track over and over and over again. This is just the most amazing album that I've heard in a decade. It's that good. So
it's got all of the check boxes. It tells a story. It's got atmosphere. It's heavy as fuck. And the people playing the instruments know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah, I think the only two things...
What a concept in 2012.
Yeah, so...
No quantized instruments, what?
Yeah. The Wild Healer and Mouth of Kala would probably be the only two that I would say... And even then, I don't want to skip them, but if anything, those are probably my two least favorite on here. Everything else is just... I can't...
The Axe.
You want to skip the Axe? Or you like the Axe?
I like the Axe.
Oh, I do too. It's probably number 4 for me on this album.
Well, it's number 3 on the actual album.
Right. It's my 4th favorite. The Gift of Guilt.
Now, Geoff, the only person that can change the order of a story is Quentin Tarantino, right?
Right. But The Gift of Guilt is my favorite song on this album. It is my favorite metal song of probably the last decade as well. It's seriously my favorite album with my favorite song on it. It's the reason why I play this all the fucking time and annoy my household. My entire household knows this album from start to finish, whether they want to or not.
So what you're telling me is this is Colors by Between the Buried and Me. I could skip a track, maybe, if I really wanted to, but I don't want to.
Exactly.
This was hard for me because I said that, The Way of All Flesh was my favorite album. And I don't think that this is worse than an album, but I think this is just where personal feelings come into play over technical proficiency. I can't sit here and tell you, I didn't like this record because, there literally is no answer to that question when you're talking about this record. I think this is what they were building up to the whole time. And I think that this, as far as they only put one album out again after this one, but I think this was their peak.
Oh, this is definitely their peak.
As far as the Gojira sound goes. And it is probably when they were in their best place. Musically, maybe even in life, they probably were achieving more success than they ever had at this point, because this was a highly anticipated release.
Yeah, and it was on it's on Warner Brothers. I mean, it's
right.
not like it's I mean, how often do you hear of a metal band on Warner Brothers?
Well, like last week, we were talking about how the Fifth Element, wasn't that good, and that how in most cases bands get popular because of who they know more so than just being good. I do feel like a band like Gojira has paid their dues and gotten to a point where they are being recognized for just being as good as they are. Because this is a band that throughout their career so far has not resorted to any type of commercialized tricks. They have not really given into the man. Because, dude, they can do clean vocals. They could do chorusy songs. They could play a, techie-ish kind of bullshit song and, retain some sort of credibility with metal fans or whatever. But really, Gojira as a collective whole has never really strayed away from their vision of what they wanted their music to sound like. So they are a band that is very much praised for just being great. And like I said, I don't have anything negative to say, and I'm probably the most fucking critical. And it's really just, I can't believe how good this record sounds, like how the band is able to inject melodies that aren't obvious right away. Like sometimes you have to go back and listen a couple of times to be like, wow, this is actually a pretty melodic song, because on the surface it might just sound like a blast fest, a slower paced blast fest. But like when you start really paying attention to how everything's interweaving together, it really becomes so much more complex than you heard that first time you listened to it.
That's the main reason I haven't re-listened to one specific record. I went through the discography and I said, I have zero complaints about all of this. So now I have to go back and re-listen to all of this.
Yeah, but as far what Dan was talking about finding like the hidden melodies, I can understand why he likes the axe so much, because that's a perfect example. As it goes on, you're just like, wow, there's so many layers that you don't hear the first go around. And it's the same way with the Gift of Guilt and Explosia and Enfant Sauvage and Liquid Fire. I mean, those songs right there, that's some of the best metal you'll ever hear in your life. I mean, I don't care what, version of metal you like. I don't care if you're a grindcore guy or, death metal.
What?
Just check out, yeah, I know. I say grindcore and Dan's ears perk up where their influences are, and they're able to mesh it into one cohesive thing. It's just metal perfection. I can't explain it any other way than that. But their next album, Magma, is a really, really personal album, especially for Mario and Joe. And it was a struggle to get this album off the ground. They lost their mother during or right before the recording of this. And I know that was a really hard thing on them, because their mom really was their support and pushed them to, get into the arts and, explore their artistic nature. And this album is, unfortunately, it's full of a lot of pain for them. And I feel for them. When you lose somebody that's important to you, it kind of seeps its way into your music. You can't help it. And it really does. This is kind of a depressing album. And, but it's still beautiful. It's still amazing. Magma is a fantastic listen. But I do have to say that my first time I listened to it, because I had listened to Enfant Sauvage so much and was so excited about the perfection that they had on that, this was more of a personal, flawed experience where they kind of bared their souls a little bit. And at first, I didn't appreciate that. But the more I listened to it, it really, really grew on me, because it showed their vulnerable side. And I really enjoyed it.
But it's very vulnerable, and it's not perfect. It is not perfect like their previous albums have been. That cold, hard technicality is essentially gone here.
Yeah.
And what you have is songs that are a little bit looser. There's a little bit of a fuzz to the guitar tone that I found noticeable. Like it sounds a little bit more Electric Wizard, a little bit less Meshuggah. And I'm totally okay with that, because I don't think I think no matter how perfect of a follow-up they did here, they could have released an album that sounded like their last 3 albums. And I think just simply the depreciating return on it would have pretty much meant that if this record didn't go in a completely different direction musically, I think the band might have started getting accused of being kind of samey and just being one-trick ponies, which is kind of ridiculous when you're talking about a band like that, but I know how fickle music fans can be, myself included. And I know that if they had put out another Sauvage or they had put out another Way of All Flesh, there would have been a little bit of a I've heard this before in there. And I don't know what their limits are, if they even have limits. But what I can tell you is that this record was much appreciated because of how much more emotional it was, how much more human it was, and dealing with like stuff that I can identify with more personally than maybe something like climate change or rescuing marine life. And I mean, all that stuff is cool. I support that, but at the same time, I'm a human being that has human feelings, and that was something that this band really hadn't explored yet. And so to hear it in the majestic way that they did it here was really refreshing. And I did appreciate a little bit more loose, like Geoff said, a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more real than we'd had with them before. Because before they were just kind of this band with these out there abstract concepts, musically and lyrically. And so to be able to identify with them as people increased my appreciation of the band from a fan perspective.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't top any of that. You both hit it on the head. That is what it is.
Yeah, and this track, Silvera, actually was nominated for a Grammy. I don't think they won, but the fact that they...
No, of course not.
The fact that something that we view as legitimate metal actually got nominated and was recognized is kind of a big fucking deal. The interesting thing is this was, I think it's by far their most commercially successful as well.
Well, sure, Geoff, it's got more clean vocals on it.
And
right.
It's 2016 where this is more acceptable.
Right. I guess that's true. I just, it's interesting that they changed their style so much.
Well, I could see how Mastodon fans and people like that would jump on board with a record like this.
Or Fear Factory even.
Yeah. It's more encompassing, I guess, of what's socially acceptable as far as what metal is. But it's still beautiful. I think this is the second album in a row where Mario's been voted the best metal drummer on the planet.
Well, there's this other guy.
Who's that other guy?
Ted Kirkpatrick?
No. Don't even get me fucking started on him. Anyway.
He's my second favorite drummer. How about that?
Well...
Meaning Mario.
Yeah, Mario. Okay. Who's your first?
Dirk.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Okay,
all his time
enough.
in soil work, man. That was my jam for a long time.
Well, I think this record definitely cool. I'm really wondering where they're gonna go from here. Are we gonna go more in this direction in the future, or are we gonna go back to hardcore technicality, emotionless?
I don't know. Well, the cool thing is they have a lot more control now than they ever have. Number one, they've always had the chops, but now they got the clout. Joe's built a studio. Joe Duplantier, that is not our Joe. Our Joe has already built a studio.
He's already built a studio.
And we're in it. But he moved from France to New York. He's gotten married, has a kid, kind of putting down roots, and that's why they built the studio there. I know it. I think it was if I remember correctly, it was quite the struggle to get it built. Because even though they're rock stars, there's still this thing called bills. And I know developing a studio to make such a fantastic record as Magma, I don't think it was an inexpensive task.
And not getting a Grammy is not the same thing as getting a Grammy money-wise.
But I like Dan, I'm very curious to see what's next. And I'm actually okay with, either version, whether it's going to be, the Enfant Sauvage or the Magma. I don't care. They're both good. They're both Gojira, and I just think it shows that they have a lot to give. There's a lot of different variations of which they can perform. They're very talented, and they can go all over the map, which I think that's part of the reason why I like it too, is that I can listen to one band and hear different things, and they're good.
I think Gojira is a band that has proven they are not afraid to be honest with their listeners. And I don't mean honest like cheesy honest. I'm going to write a song about this thing that happened to me when I was a kid. And I'm going to be honest with my friends and honest with my listeners. But they have shown emotion in their music when they didn't have to. They've had a message in their music when they didn't have to. They're almost a band that, if they were painters, they could paint a Picasso if they wanted to. But what we're giving you is this bowl of fruit. It's very intentional. It has a purpose. And it's something that you should take the time and the multiple re-listens, which I have embarked on, by the way, Geoff, to figure out what that reason and that purpose is.
Find that link.
Speaking of links, Geoff, what's your album of the week?
Well, it's going to be a total cop-out, but I think it's kind of obvious of what I'm going to say, considering what I've already said. It's going to be Enfant Sauvage by Gojira is my album of the week.
Dan, what about you?
Tear from the Red by Poison the Well.
I've been getting ready for next week. The Triptych by Demon Hunter.
Derman Hunter. Stay tuned for Demon Hunter next week. Long time coming, one of our most requested episodes, so we will have it for you guys next week.
And on that note, this has been episode 67 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.